Organic chemistry is the study of carbon-containing compounds. In the past, scientists thought complex organic compounds could only be synthesized within living organisms, a theory known as vitalism. However, in 1953, Stanley Miller proved this theory false with an experiment. The goal of the experiment was to prove that complex organic compounds can be synthesized in the absence of life under early Earth environments. The experimental setup is shown. In one chamber, water is heated to produce water vapor that is transferred to a second chamber containing methane, ammonia, and hydrogen gas. Periodically, electrical shocks imitating lightning go off to provide energy to synthesize organic molecules. The mixture of gases is then transferred to a pipe with a condenser. The condenser is responsible for cooling the gas mixture so that condensation of gases take place. The resulting liquid is collected in a glass bulb. When Stanley Miller analyzed the liquid in the glass bulb, he found a mixture of complex organic compounds essential to life. This experiment proved that complex organic compounds can be synthesized in the absence of life. Now let's move on to discuss why carbon can be used to form such a diverse group of molecules. First, we need to be able to determine the number of bonds an atom can form. Let's start by drawing the electron configuration of hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and fluorine. Here is the general rule of thumb. The number of bonds an atom can form is equal to the number of additional electrons needed to complete the valence shell. For instance, the hydrogen atom has one valence electron and therefore needs one additional electron to complete its valence shell. Recall, the first shell can hold a maximum of 2 electrons. Because one additional electron was required to fill the valence shell, the hydrogen atom can form one bond. The carbon atom, on the other hand, has 4 valence electrons. 4 additional electrons are needed to complete the valence shell because the second shell can hold a maximum of 8 electrons. For this reason, carbon can form 4 bonds. Moving on to the other atoms, nitrogen requires 3 additional electrons to complete its valence shell. Oxygen requires 2, fluorine requires 1. This translates to nitrogen, oxygen, and fluorine being able to form 3, 2, and 1 bond respectively. The carbon atom can form a diverse group of molecules because carbon has the ability to form 4 covalent bonds. For this reason, carbon can be connected to at most 4 other atoms. The diversity of carbon molecules is shown here. Because these molecules consist of carbon and hydrogen only, they are referred to as hydrocarbons. Notice hydrocarbons can form straight chains, branched pattern, and rings. Now we are ready to move on to our next topic. Isomers are compounds with the same molecular formula, but different structure. There are 3 different types of isomers: structural isomers, geometric isomers, and enantiomers. We will start our discussion with structural isomers. Structural isomers have the same molecular formula, but different atomic connectivity. Let's examine 2 structural isomers of C7H16. Although both structures have the same molecular formula, their atomic connectivity differ. The structure on the left is linear, whereas the structure on the right is branched. Geometric isomers have the same molecular formula, but different atomic connectivity about a double bond. Consider C2Cl2 H2. There are two geometric isomers for this molecule. When the chlorines are both on the same side of the double bond, we call it a cis isomer. When the chlorines are on opposite sides of the double bond, we call it a trans isomer. These geometric isomers are distinct because the double bond cannot be rotated to make both isomers structurally identical. Before we discuss our last type of isomer, let's define asymmetric carbon. An asymmetric carbon is a carbon connected to 4 different chemical constituents. An example is presented here. Notice this carbon is connected to 4 different constituents: 1 hydrogen, 1 chlorine, 1 amine group, and 1 methyl group. A molecule with an asymmetric carbon has a mirror image. Let's take a look at the mirror image of this molecule. These molecules are not identical because one molecule cannot be superimposed on the other. For this reason, these molecules are a type of isomer known as enantiomers. Enantiomers have the same molecular formula but different atomic connectivity about an asymmetric carbon. Our next topic is functional groups. Let's examine 2 molecules with minor differences: N-acetylglucosamine and glucose. Notice both structures have the same base structure. The only difference is the group of atoms attached to the bottom right-hand corner of the molecules. These groups of atoms are known as functional groups. Functional groups are chemical groups that can alter the structure and chemical reactivity of a molecule. There are a few important functional groups that I will discuss here. The first is the hydroxyl group. The structure is presented here. It consists of a hydrogen bonded to oxygen. The oxygen can be connected to a hydrocarbon, denoted by R. The class of molecules that contain hydroxyl groups is referred to as alcohols. Examples of alcohols include methanol and ethanol. Notice the name of alcohols always end with OL. Let's discuss a property of the hydroxyl group using methanol. Because oxygen is more electronegative, the electrons are pulled closer to the oxygen. This results in a partial negative charge for the oxygen and a partial positive charge for hydrogen. The addition of a hydroxyl group makes the molecule polar. The next functional group is the carboxyl group. The structure consists of a carbon that forms a double bond with oxygen and a single bond with a hydroxyl group. The carbon can be connected to a hydrocarbon, denoted by R. The class of molecules that contain a carboxyl group is called carboxylic acids, or organic acids. An example is acetic acid, commonly referred to as vinegar. The proton in the carboxyl group of the acetic acid can be donated to a water molecule to form an acetate and hydronium. The ability to generate hydronium is why any molecule with a carboxyl group is considered an acid. The third functional group is the amino group. The structure consists of nitrogen that forms bonds with 2 hydrogen atoms. The nitrogen can be connected to a hydrocarbon denoted by R. The class of molecules that contains an amino group is called amines. An example is methylamine. The nitrogen in methylamine can accept a proton from water to form methylammonium and hydroxide. The ability to generate hydroxide is why any molecule with an amino group is considered a base. The last functional group that we are interested in is the phosphate group. The structure consists of a phosphorus that forms a double bond with oxygen, single bonds with two negatively charged oxygen atoms, and a single bond with oxygen. The oxygen on the left can be connected to a hydrocarbon denoted by R. The class of molecules that contain phosphate groups is called organic phosphates. An example is a high-energy molecule known as Adenosine Triphosphate, or ATP for short. The structure is presented here. Notice the three phosphate groups contribute multiple negative charges that repel each other. A cluster of negative charges can be thought as a loaded spring ready to release energy. When water is added to the ATP, one of the phosphate groups dissociates and less negative charges are localized in one area. There is a release of energy and formation of an adenosine diphosphate, phosphate group, and proton. In summary, clustering phosphate groups is a method to store energy.